If note-taking's driving you crazy, if you're not getting the grades that you want, stay tuned in. I'm going to try to help you with that during this unit. I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to make your note-taking more effective. But before we get to that, let's talk about why we do this. If your main purpose for taking notes is because you have to or because you think it's going to be on the test, well, you are absolutely pretty normal. You're also, unfortunately, probably pretty ineffective because our purpose matters. Why do we read textbooks? Why do we take notes? Let's take a look at that. Well, we read to learn. Through reading, we learn specific information as well as ways of thinking. That's right, there are two primary things we take from the reading, that information as well as the ways of thinking. What do I mean by ways of thinking? I mean, we're learning to think like the author when we read. So the author is an expert in their subject area. They process logic and information perhaps differently than we do in that subject area. And when we read, we learn that. Okay. If all we needed was specific information, we could probably just learn from bullet point lists, but that's not what we need in order to be successful. We need much more. We need to learn how to think the way they do, the authors do. When I read a science book, I learn specific information and I learn to think more like the scientist who wrote the book. When I read a social studies textbook, I learn specific information about people and I learn to think like the historian, the geographer, or sociologist who wrote the book. The same is true for a business book, cookbook, math book, engineering book, medical book, and so on. We learn specific information and we learn to follow the logic of the subject the way the pros do. We have two main academic purposes as we read. Why do we take notes while we read? Basically, for those same two reasons. We collect specific information that we'll need at a later date. We might need it for the assignment the next day. We might need it for the test the next week. We also take notes to help us process new ideas, to connect our thinking to the author's logic. You're reading something, you're wrestling with it, you don't totally get it, so you start to write it out a bit, your understanding of what's happening. And that is how we learn. Thanks, guys. I'm looking forward to giving you some more practical tips on how we can improve our note taking very soon. Thanks. Bye.